Welcome to Lab the Podcast. We are on the road visiting churches who are leading with beauty. It's something that we started just a few months ago, trying to go out and explore, starting right here in Tampa Bay, churches that are doing a fantastic job leading with beauty. So we're at First Pres down in South Tampa, and we're going to see Reverend Kathy Connor at First Pres. Hey Kathy,
Zach.
how are you?
Welcome to First Pres. I'm thrilled that you're here.
We are so glad to be here. Thanks for making time and space. I've wanted to come for so long. This has been on our list, and this is new, right?
Yes, it is. Our first Sunday here was Christmas Eve, 2023.
That's incredible. How long were you all building and in the process?
This was a 5-year journey of faith. It was Abrahamic. The Lord made it very clear He wanted us to move from downtown. And He also said, you don't know where you're going, but you're going. Yeah. So we had to trust that journey, pray and fast, and here we are. This is what He had in mind.
When you left downtown, and we'll talk more about downtown and the space you were in, but when you left there, this did not exist. You did not know this would be home.
That's right. We started praying and fasting, and when it was clear to leave, we started looking at 30 different properties all over South Tampa. And it came down to 4. We started doing prayer walks, and then the Lord made Himself very clear that this was the location.
Yeah. That's so cool. Well, one of the reasons we wanted to come to First Pres, first of all, just the endeavor to build a church and like the importance of the local church having places and not letting those places be erased or like in other cultures and contexts, they're just empty. We're turning them on the West Coast into hotels or whatever. Yes. And here you're endeavoring to say, we're going to believe God to put a local church and to actually build it and to invest a lot of money and a lot of resource to do it, and to do it really thoughtfully. And so I couldn't wait to hear more. I want you to tell me, when you all dreamt, once you knew this would be home, and this was the piece of property, I'm sure you prayed and walked.
Yes.
What was this? Was there a story that was kind of guiding the way it would feel when you walked through the front doors?
Yes, for us, in our design of this space, as we dreamed about it, we knew that we wanted to create a relational environment where people could encounter and experience the warmth of Jesus. And we wanted to accomplish that through every means possible, through our architecture, through light, through the height of ceilings, through the flexibility of spaces, and more. So every square inch that you're about to see was thought through with that kind of intention.
Yeah. We say it all the time, but Winston Churchill said, first we shape our buildings and thereafter they shape us. And one of the things I appreciate about you and Fitz is just the leadership to take that seriously and say, like you mentioned, the height is going to do something to us when we go into a space. The lighting is going to do something. One of the things I noticed, you can't help but know that relationship matters because this is for people. And it's for real people who want to sit and stand and talk and rest. Right. And you chose all of that, but also the size of this is huge. Like some people would say, like wasted square footage. You can do something else with it. Why was it so important to give this much space to not just a gathering space, but a place where people can feel like they could live?
Well, we know that people need to be able to connect with one another. And so God built us that way. We learned that if you want to create a space where real relationships can develop, you need to have your gathering area be the same square footage as your worship space. So we held on because we were told, goodness, you could make this a little less expensive. And we were just adamant. We wanted to stay focused on that commitment. And what has happened is that people can come in here and just enjoy conversations that are not rushed, authentic conversations with other adults while their kids are running around like crazy. We also wanted to create a space where someone for whom church is new, or they've never experienced it before, it might be even uncomfortable, that they could walk in and just breathe with relief that it feels like a living room, familiar, accessible, and then that opens them up to more with God, with us. So that's what we were committed to, and we're seeing it happening in this space.
Your perspective, just theologically, is so beautiful that there isn't like a sacred and a secular split. God is God of all of those parts of our lives. And so whether we eat or we drink or whatever we do, it is to the glory of God. So explicitly, as we enter the sanctuary, you'll see that to God be the glory. But I love that out here, connecting with people is for the glory of God. Being human is for the glory of God. And this story, I mean, you immediately are nested within the story. And we always talk about art as, like Lewis said, not something you look at, but you look through. And I couldn't help but notice these two pieces are kind of an Exodus and a new Exodus narrative here. Tell us about these two pieces.
The beauty of this is they were created by a woman in Tampa who wanted to remain anonymous.
Wow.
And she gave them to us as a gift to the church. We just gave her a sense of who we are and how we feel like the Lord is leading us as a church to be on His kingdom mission in Tampa. And this is what she created for us. And so, yes, it is the new Exodus through Jesus Christ and Moses leading out from slavery in Egypt. That's our journey of faith. And we're hoping that even someone new to faith can sense that through this art. Just looking at it, thinking about it, they don't even need to know the story. You can kind of tell. It's so good for us at V3, where the fine arts and visual arts are so important to us. A picture's worth 1,000 words. And when I saw these, I thought, what a brilliant gift to give to the church, that theologically, from the new Exodus, old Exodus to new Exodus, we're talking the most rigorous, beautiful parts of Christian theology, and you wouldn't even know that that's what you're looking at, but it's shaping you. It's beautiful. So you have art like that that is telling huge, magnificent stories, and then you have these hints on this wall, and these stood out to me because they look like they're from a different world. They don't look like South Tampa. So tell us about these. You did not just crop these out of a Photoshop or stock photography. Tell us about these. And I'm sure that some people come and think we did.
Oh yeah,
you know?
Just, hey, that's a picture of a church, let's put it on the wall.
But we decided we wanted to take pictures of our downtown historic church using black and white, using unique angles of spots in our church downtown that were architecturally interesting, but helped tell God's story of First Pres since 1884.
That's incredible.
That's when we were founded. And we were actually founded in Ida Hale's living room. And at one point, we even worshiped in an opera house in downtown Tampa, which I know you'd appreciate.
Oh, yes, I love it.
And then ultimately in this version of our building.
We just appreciate, when we talk about leading with beauty in the church, leading with beauty, people don't have a sense of imagination in our typical cultural moment. And so that stuff can be lost so easily. And holding on to some of these things, the spires that point up. Tell us something, and maybe we don't have spires today, but we can still lift your eyes, and we'll talk about how you do it, and the gates with crosses and lampposts with crowns. I mean, it's just, it's beautiful. So well done. I want to know more about how you and why it was important to preserve that sense of continuity generationally. And I heard a rumor that there are some architectural plans. So can we go that way?
Oh, yes, let's do it.
Show us where these architectural plans are, and maybe tell us a little bit about why is it important, not just the pictures of the old building, but even that sense that there are people that have gone before us, and that this is not a new project, even though it's a new build. There's a sense that there's been something going on for quite some time. Why was that important?
Well, you know, we stand on the shoulders of other believers, you know, all the way back to Jesus's time, right? And so we have just this rich story of men and women who were bold and courageous in their love for Jesus. And, you know, even when Teddy Roosevelt came to town with Rough Riders, First Pres reached out to them in compassion with supplies and food and blankets.
That's incredible.
Over 500 soldiers became Jesus followers as a result of that.
That's incredible.
That's a story we want to tell, right? Because that's who we still are, right?
Oh, that's so cool.
So,
let me pause. Before we see those architectural plans, I can't help, I just walked by writing right now near the baseboard. What is that writing down there?
All over the church, we have tucked in passages of scripture that tell the story of Jesus and reflect who he's called us to be. So this one happens to be from Luke chapter 12, and it says, from everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded. And from the one who has been entrusted with much, much will be asked.
Yeah.
Even our bathrooms
Yeah.
have scripture and portraits from historic places in Tampa. On the men's bathroom, we're about to put up the passage that says, where Jesus says, "Come and follow me, and I will make you fishers of men."
Yeah.
And the whole picture is a man fishing in Tampa. I'd love for you to see.
Well, just the way you're guiding people, and this flows into the office,
Yes.
and that whole idea of servanthood in
Yes.
flowing into your offices is great. And you didn't just write it. There's actually Braille on the signs as
Right.
well.
Right.
And I
Right.
noticed one of the most beautiful stories we've been able to have is with a woman who was signing in a worship service. And it was such a beautiful expression. I love that you guys included everybody
you.
gets to worship together. It's
Thank
beautiful.
you. And we even have scripture about being in a spiritual battle in our office conference room, because that's where we meet as a staff to pray and to plan and to vision cast. And we know the evil one would love to squelch all that.
Yep.
So we're reminded on our very walls of staying focused on his mission for us and loving each other well. Yeah.
I want to know more about, and maybe we'll get into this later in your story, but the level of intentionality with everything is really exceptional.
Thank you.
Is that, if you said more you or more Fitz, who's?
Well, I was serving on the design team, but Fitz was an important part of the story, helping us continue to keep that pastoral focus, that theological foundation from which we did everything. And really, that was my role on the design team, especially.
That's
because
awesome.
we had design gurus, and then there was me, who loves design and has an eye for it, but not the expertise.
Yeah.
So my heart was keeping us focused on what is Jesus saying about our space and what maximizes our ability to tell his story.
That's awesome.
But
So tell us about these blueprints and the story. Why was it important to bring these with you?
Right.
And to give them such prominent position in the church?
Well, thank you. We were so excited about taking the original architectural drawings. As you can see, they are done by hand on linen. That's how architects used to draw. So each of these drawings is unique. And can you imagine making a mistake? You'd have to start over.
That's incredible.
But they were done with such care that we had the opportunity to preserve them and decided to feature them in the offices, again, to connect us to the faithfulness of God's story for us. That is, to us, beautiful, magnificent, and speaks to God's character.
Yeah.
And we notice when people come into the offices and they're looking at these, it typically takes their breath away.
Yeah. Well, especially if you're new to church or you're new to South Tampa, a lot of people moving into Tampa, and you show up and you go, this is brand new, it's beautiful, must be a new church plant.
Right.
And to show up and say, oh, no, these roots are deep in not just the story of God, but the story of Tampa and what he's been doing. I love these. These are absolutely
Aren't they magnificent?
Magnificent. And I'm so glad people get a chance to see them. And if you're watching this podcast, listening, I encourage you, come find First Pres. It's beautiful. So come to worship on a Sunday, but ask them if you can come back and see these. These are stunning. I didn't know they were on linen. That's absolutely gorgeous.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I want to keep talking about the history because one of the things that I noticed right when we walked through the door is there is a beautiful gold cross right inside, prominently featured. Go ahead through that. And if I heard right, that came from the other church as well.
It did.
Yeah. Tell us why not only you brought this with you, but this is the centerpiece leading into the sanctuary.
It really is. This was the cross that generations looked at every time they were in our downtown sanctuary. And as you can see, we said the Zach Street Sanctuary Cross, to God be the glory. This is what we're about right here. Jesus Christ, his love for us, crucified and died for us, There is no other reason for us to be here. And it's what puts a skip in my step every day when I know this is the one to whom I give my allegiance and my heart. And this is what we're inviting people into. And most folks do notice this cross because it's, of course, shiny and it's made of metal. But then you come inside and we have a very different kind of cross featured in our sanctuary that's much larger. But again, the focus is Jesus. It's not our personalities. It's not a spiffy, beautiful, architecturally pleasing campus. It's him.
Yeah, it's purposeful.
It's him.
And I think even the design, we just recorded a symphony and we were able to go over to Brno in the Czech Republic and record this piece. And anywhere you look, there were hints of gold. And what they knew in an older world was that the divine is represented by those touches of gold that would tell you that there's more to the story. And some people have criticized the church in the past. Oh, look at golden crosses and these things. And we say, no, those are artistic invitations for you to see that there's something other and there's something divine. And so I love the fact that this thing that was an instrument of torture and death, the church has actually said, no, look right at this. And there's something
more
brilliant.
beautiful.
Yeah, it's absolutely stunning. Let's talk about that, because when I went into the sanctuary, that's the first thing that you see, not only outside, but it's prominently featured on the front of the sanctuary. And the first thing I noticed is your eyes are immediately at the cross, and the cross draws you up. You can't help but keep going up. A lot of churches today are having a conversation of, do we keep the cross as a prominent fixture? Because as you mentioned out there, somebody who's new to church, they don't know those things and they may not understand those things. Why was it important to you all to say, in this sanctuary, we're going to put that directly in the front of our worship space?
We hope that it will prompt amazing conversations about, what is that? I mean, for some people, they truly do not understand. They don't know. Not only this generation, but their parents as well. And so we want to create that environment where they can ask those questions and feel comfortable doing so and inquire, what does the cross even mean? And who is Jesus anyway? I know he was a good guy. But beyond that, most people really don't know much. And so I think it prompts wonder and opens hearts to, there's something bigger going on here that I don't fully understand. And even our architecture, we were hoping to create this vaulted ceiling. You know, again, the architect said you could really bring this down and save some money. But we wanted to go up to draw hearts up to the Lord and help them draw near to the Lord, even without them realizing that that's what's happening. We also wanted to nod to God's faithfulness in history with his people through our connection to the downtown church with the wood beams and the lights that are similar to what we had downtown, and just create light, lots of light, so that when people come in, they're experiencing, you know, the glory of God. And then, of course, we can drop the shades and create a quieter, darker atmosphere when we need to, and then lift those shades back up, because we want people to be eye to eye with each other. And even when any of us are preaching, we want to look people in the eyes, you know, and this is we, it's not me. And this is the space where we're reminded that we are corporate and we are the body of Christ and we get to love each other.
It's magnificent. The kind of the bravery, the boldness to go light, when in some ways, right, we can, even in my own house, I have people for dinner, you dim the lights a little bit and kind of pull you in, which is great, and it's beautiful and it sets ambiance. But it's a bold thing to say, come in here and it's going to be filled with light. And up at the front, we're going to draw your attention and with a piece of art call you to pay attention to the thing that's most important to us, and that something is telling a story of the love of God in a way that you may have never understood or heard. But those questions are going to begin to fill your heart and mind in the space. I love that when you walk in here, you get that sense of up, and I love the nod. I grew up in a church that had light sconces a lot like this, and I think it feels really good to a generation that maybe didn't grow up in the church, but they have a memory of
Yes.
their family's time in a church, or
Right.
maybe at one point in their life they went in and they really needed a community and they didn't know why,
Yeah.
and it felt like church. And there's an
Absolutely.
element here that feels like it's very welcoming, but it's very worshipful. And there's something other, transcendent in this space. You all
Yes.
did a fantastic, fantastic job.
Well, thank you
Beautiful.
so much. I know when we were first building it, some people, as we moved from downtown, they were scared that we were going to create a box.
Yeah.
And we said, well, first of all, that's not who we are, and that's not who God has called us to be. And so as we promised, there will be lots of light. And of course, that's where health and creation happens and where people can thrive. And we want them to experience it spiritually as well as physically and more, you know?
Even the green, when you walk through the lobby in that gathering space, there are green stools, green benches, and everything is from the environment. It's greens and tans and stones, and it's all the natural world.
Yeah.
Can I ask you some questions? I want to know more about your story and a little bit more about the church, because I'm sure as people listen to this and watch this, they maybe have never heard of First Pres, and they go, this is the first time I'm hearing about this church, and I know it's beautiful, I know they were intentional with their space, but I want to know more about the people in the church. So if we can, let's go have a seat and we'll catch up.
Absolutely.
I'm Zach Elliott, Executive Director of VUVIVO, and together with our partners, we are recovering the deep Christian tradition of standing behind the arts by making significant investment in visual art, music, and literature. We're working together with some of the world's most gifted fine artists, composers, and authors to wondrously reveal Christianity and invite people to know God personally. This work to recover the tradition of standing behind the arts is going to take a fresh generation of patrons committed to resourcing and releasing these great artists to use the highest and best of their gifts to the glory of God and for the good of the world. You can join us in that work by becoming a V3 partner. Reach out for more information or go to vuvivo.com/support to join us in standing behind the arts. Pastor Kathy, this is incredible. Like you all have done something really faithfully, really humbly, really with a lot of wisdom, a lot of prudence to take intentional steps, but to do it in a way that feels really welcoming to people who know nothing about the tradition of the faith. And yet is really honoring to people who know it deeply. And that's a note that is pretty tough to hit. So I'm pretty just honored to be able to be here and tell a little bit of the story. And I couldn't help, there's entryways to kid spaces all through there. And when we started, you made a point to say that there's kids running through here. How important to the life of the church is it that we are intentionally creating space for kids and for young people to feel like it's their home as well?
Oh, absolutely. As Jesus welcomed children, we want to reflect that, and we just go out of our way to make it fun, but about Jesus, where a kid is saying to mom and dad, I want to go to church. I want to be with Miss Rachel in the crew program here at First Pres. And so kids are bringing their parents because they're experiencing Jesus in a way that they can connect to and relate to. And that's creating this rich environment of families with babies and toddlers and teenagers. And we even find that a lot of our young professionals will tell us that they love being here because they look around and they see their own demographic, but that they love seeing babies and children, grandparents, aged men and women, all generations, and there's something about that feels very healthy and vibrant. And so we are committed to that, and we are genuinely thrilled that that's what God is doing in our midst. It's why I think we started with that Churchill quote that first we shape our buildings, thereafter they shape us. But the things we choose to include in a building, prioritize in a building, they are going to shape the type of community that lives in that space. And I just think that when you look at the gospel and the invitation to all who are weary, all who are thirsty,
that a child could feel welcomed and a
Right.
part of something, and yet still that sense of reverence and transcendence. That is so deeply important, and it can't be lost. And from one generation to the other generation, it takes a lot to build something. And to find yourself being the generation who built is probably surprising in some ways.
Right.
Is there anybody in your story who would be surprised that you're sitting here as a pastor who helped to build a church?
You know, Fitz and I moved to Tampa to lead Young Life in Tampa initially in 1980. And so we were laser focused on teenagers.
Yep.
And so we have decades of teenagers that have grown up and they've had their own kids, and their kids are getting ready to have kids, and who knew that we were committed to relationships, to incarnational ministry. You know, God became a man and lived among us. We go into the teenage world and live among them. That's still the story that God has called us to be about real relationships with God and with each other. And we've discovered that that leads to real transformation. So when you ask, would someone be surprised in terms of my Tampa story, I think they'd say, and I've certainly heard them mention, we feel like we got to keep going with you.
Wow.
From when we were teenagers and now as adults. And for Fitz and for me, I mean, we could pinch ourselves that we are at this moment in the history of the church. We couldn't be more on fire or passionate about being here right now, getting to do that, walking with people in life and faith, eye to eye, heart to heart, all of us transforming by the love of Christ.
Yeah.
So
well, it's incredible to hear you talk about the 80s. I love the 80s. And probably Tampa looked a lot different then than it does now. South Tampa looks very different from downtown. When you show up here on a Sunday morning, what does feel different in a sense, like that God knew what he was doing? He did not leave it as an accident that you would end up on this piece of property. And so I'm sure there's a sense when you're walking in here that over time, I'm getting a little bit fuller glimpse of what God might have called us here for. Give me a sense of that.
So when this man named Noah knocked on our door in downtown Tampa.
It's a separate podcast. That's a crazy story.
It is a crazy story. And asked us if we'd sell our part of the block. We started praying and asking the Lord and brought it to the whole church. Ask Jesus, is this you, God, or not? After a year of prayer and study, the Lord made himself clear that he was sending us. What's amazing is he brought us to a space where we were actually closer to 85% of our folks living in South Tampa, making us not only more accessible, but you've never seen people so excited about having a parking lot.
That's right.
Because we had zero parking downtown, so he rescued us in that sense.
Yep.
And it was harder and harder for people to access us. Now we're exploding with growth. He knew exactly what he was doing, and what we saw were signs and wonders all along the way. It was clearly Spirit-led. Our job was just to listen and stay close to his voice.
So cool. One of my favorite nerdy books is The Death and Life of Great American Cities by Jane Jacobs. And she talks about architecture and design and the design of cities. And it's a note to downtown Tampa, in every downtown space. What we can get wrong is that living element that you have to allow people to park and you have to create accessibility and people need that room to breathe like an ecosystem. And if that's not allowed, you'll struggle. And the fact that God rescued you and put you in a place where people could come and without barrier, without hindrance, it's pretty cool. And it'll be cool to see what he saw 5 years from now when you get a decade into this space. It's incredible.
Which is really fun to imagine. You know?
Real relationships, real transformation. I see it here, I see it there, I see it in the architecture and in the art. And so that story is being told, which is being done in a really, really beautiful way every Sunday and feels really fresh. You hinted at a couple nods to tradition. In your church, First Pres, there's a tradition that you all came up out of and has informed some of the practices. And I think some of the young people that we're in relationship with, talking to, they are longing for and yearning for those parts of the church that allow us to have continuity and a sense of permanence and a sense of history. And so the liturgical churches actually are offering something that touches a very deep need in people. What are some of the things that First Pres is doing that are important, that again, we may not assume that they matter as deeply as they matter, but they do to real people who have not had any connection to the church? Those are the things they actually are connecting to. What are some of those things that First Pres is doing?
Such a great question. I would say one of them is the power of praying together, and so praying the Lord's Prayer, but praying it in different translations, so that some people come from a tradition where it's debts and debtors, or trespasses and trespassers, or sins and sinners. Some have never prayed it before. And so to keep it fresh rather than rote, or to introduce it to people that are new, we pray it in different versions, each time. And we feel it's important to kind of stand together because it's a we. We are the body of Christ together. Another tradition that we love and that we need for our souls is sharing in communion together. And we have chosen to invite people to come forward as an act of faith, as a bold step that is pretty courageous when you consider what it means to come forward and say, I need you, Jesus. And then taking the bread and dipping it in the cup. What I love is in that moment, we get to look them in the eyes and say, this is Jesus's body broken for you. And these are words from Scripture that go back, 2,000 years, but they are important words for people to hear. And it's a sacred moment.
Yes.
Very sacred moment. And, you're eye to eye with someone who may be in tears, or may have gone through something very traumatic or difficult, or someone who's celebrating.
Yeah.
And yet we all come in the tradition of communion in that moment. Very, very powerful.
I just sent a daughter to college, first time we've done that, and we were having a conversation, Dad, how do I find a church? And so we were talking about all of those things, and we come from a church and a background where communion is of central importance. And so it was so cool to hear her say she found a church that offers that. And I think there's something, God meets us in those things and says, I will be with you anytime you're gathered together. And I will come to you through my word and through these things that I've left you. And it's beautiful. I think that people are hungry for the life of the church, and we don't even really know what that means, some of us, and some people coming back to the church. What have you seen as people have come into First Pres? What are some of the things that as a pastor you see that lead to real transformation, the stuff that matters the most when it comes to God at work in the lives of people in the church? You mentioned, you and Fitz both can teach and preach, and the centrality of the word, the centrality of Christ's sacrifice, those things are on the forefront. But what are some of the other things that are helping lead to transformation that maybe people wouldn't know that's why we're doing those things?
Right. So, like I said earlier, creating those environments where more and more authentic conversations can take place. So every decision we make when we look at our church calendar is through the lens of, does this lead us into real relationships that lead to real transformation? Does this help us become disciples who become disciple makers? But also, we know that for someone to come on a Sunday morning, that won't be enough to grow and explode and ignite their heart in faith. And so we talk often and early and always about life groups and about service teams, which are places where people can step into and be with others to talk about Jesus, to ask, hey, can someone tell me why that cross is on the wall? And feel safe to do that. Creating these safe environments for honest conversations based on Scripture, bringing the Bible forward where no one has to worry that they do or don't know anything about the Bible, but can enjoy going deeper with Jesus and deeper with each other. But we know that happens in life group settings or small groups, and also, like I said, in service teams where maybe you and I are serving together on a team that reaches children who are hungry all weekend long, like N68 and other organizations. But the team leader is trained to create opportunity while I'm storing the food and organizing the food to have conversations about why we're doing what we're doing. What's our biblical foundation? Yeah. And what's happening in my heart when I'm doing this? Asking great questions that help us go deeper with each other and with Jesus, even as we're serving together. Yeah. So we think in both of those two spaces are primary for that transformation to happen. Yeah. And then, of course, we offer all kinds of other opportunities, but those are two of the primary spaces outside of worship. Yeah,
I love you're describing the church's function as a mediating institution, and in culture we used to have so many of those, right? There were so many ways that people could nest themselves in with something meaningful, and they could know each other, they could be known, they could serve together, things that would take them out of their own story. Yes. That was just part of the fabric of our culture. Right. And sadly, we're facing these two great crises of a crisis of meaning and a crisis of isolation and loneliness. And that's where we stand back and just admire what God is doing with First Pres. And He did not make a mistake. God said the church and the presence of the local church is going to be where the life and the beauty of the gospel continues to grow and to bear fruit from generation to generation to generation. And so I was so excited to find First Pres and talk about how you are leading with beauty, because I think it's a moment for people who are longing for meaning, they're longing for connection. They maybe don't have language for the gospel even, but they know the hope of the gospel that beams out of these windows. And maybe, God is at work. He's been at work in this story. He's at work in their story. And so thank you for investing and sacrificing to keep that great work of the local church going. And if you're watching this podcast, I just want to encourage you. We take it seriously when we're praying and thinking about where is God at work, leading with beauty, inviting people to the hope of the gospel. And when our team was talking about where we could go to tell that story, First Pres was like, first on the, we were just like, yes, we're going there. We're going to our home church at Redeemer. And then we're going to keep highlighting these stories. But it's not lost on us that it takes a lot of sacrifice. So we want to say thank you to you and Pastor Fitz, but Pastor Kathy, thank you for giving up some time. And I'll give you just a last word for maybe the person who gave up on church and they said, maybe I grew up in it and it didn't mean anything to our family, or I just lost contact with it when my kids were young and we got busy with sports and all of that. But if I'm honest, there is a sadness in me, there is a loss of something, and I don't have words for it, but I kind of want to come back. But I'm kind of nervous. I'm kind of scared to do that, and I don't know where to start. What do you say to that person who's like, I want that community, but I don't know how to make that first step back?
Oh, first of all, I understand completely, and you are not alone. I want you to know that before you were even born, Jesus was calling your name. He created you and couldn't wait for the opportunity to connect with you when you're ready. He will never stop inviting you. He will never stop pursuing you. In Psalm 23, it says He pursues us with His goodness and His mercy for the rest of our lives. And so He gets you. He loves you regardless of whether you want to do this with Him or you're kind of interested, but maybe not. That doesn't change His love and interest and desire for you. And so I would just love for the opportunity to connect with you personally or to invite you to come here and meet us and get a feel for the warmth and the hospitality of Jesus. He's the most non-judgmental, loving, compassionate God that you will ever encounter in your life. There is nothing like Jesus, and I'm always in awe of that truth. So I'm speaking from my own heart to you. Just come on, and it doesn't matter how you're dressed, doesn't matter what you did the night before, none of that matters. And just come and be yourself, and you'll find that you're in good company because we're all a hot mess. And we would love you have you join us, and we're very real, very authentic. We're going to tell you the truth, and we're going to love on you really well.
That's beautiful. It feels like that here.
Thank you.
Walking through the door today, I think our whole team felt that. So,
Thank
Pastor
you.
Kathy, thank you, and we'll be praying for you. Everybody out there, add First Pres to your list of churches to pray for and pastors to pray for. You all have done a really beautiful thing, and keep leading with beauty. A lot of us are cheering you on, but the world needs it, and we're in a moment where there's a need for a lot of hope. So, thank you for what you're doing.
You're so gracious. Thank you with all my heart.